welcome to the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports, Nick Ficarelli, and the beacons of lists. The experiments are on the chalkboard, and of course the test subjects, they come rolling in. We got a very big show, as usual, for you tonight. We're going to have Will Reeve from the All Weather Fans podcast and a few other podcasts that he just got rolling these last couple of weeks. We have Tom Harding from Major League Baseball Network and MLB.com, who will be calling in live from the Winter Meetings. We're going to have the Fishman himself, Andrew Fain, calling in as well. But you know what we do here at the Mad Scientist Sports Lab every Saturday night during football season to start our show. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we got to give you your fantasy football fix. And what better way to do that than give you Allie's Fantasy Alley with the lovely, the beautiful, and the talented Miss Allie Fontana. Good evening, Allie. How are you?
I'm doing great, Nick. It's great to be with you in this advance to Week 13 of the NFL and fantasy football season. Hard to believe we're this far along into the season, and for many leagues, this is basically your last week of regular season play, so it's a big push to the playoffs for a lot of folks.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for me, I will not be doing any playoffs because the league that I'm in is rotisserie style, so I have to suffer through another 4 weeks of pure, unadulterated mayhem. So, and talking about mayhem, Thursday night, yeah, I have no words for what happened on Thursday night. All I know is that a lot of people said a prayer, and a lot of prayers were answered, and a lot of prayers were denied. The Hail Mary. The Hail Mary. That's all Thursday night's going to be known for now is the Hail Mary. Allie, you have to say, if you're an Aaron Rodgers owner or if you're a Richard Rodgers owner, you must be one very happy person right now, especially after Thursday night.
Or just a regular Packers fan. I mean, it didn't look good, with the Lions going up 17-0 early on in the game, but it proved not to be enough. And, there was some weird scoring in that game. I mean, Calvin Johnson had a beautiful 17-yard catch and run earlier in the game, which, I made the rounds Twitter over and over again. I mean, it was a thing of beauty, and that seemed to get lost, after the Packers mounted their comeback. But there was a weird thing where James Starks fumbled in the end zone, and Randall Cobb recovered it. So there are some fantasy owners I saw that were kind of disappointed because in their league they did not get points for Cobb's touchdown. It really depends on how your league awards points, but since it didn't actually catch that ball but recovered a fumble, in some leagues you got the points for Cobb and in others you didn't. So it was crazy. But yeah, I mean, Richard Rodgers, a lot of people have used him. I mean, he's been, I wouldn't say reliable, but he was on a roll where he'd at least catch a touchdown pass. We've had so many injuries to tight ends this season. In fact, last week we lost Gronk for a period of time, Jimmy Graham for the season. Tyler Eifert's likely to be sidelined this week with the neck stinger. So some people went ahead and used Rodgers, in their league, and they were obviously rewarded with the long touchdown. And, so if you had to use them, you were happy about that. And certainly Aaron Rodgers salvaged his fantasy game, 24 of 36 for 273 and 2 touchdowns. And he added another 27 yards and a rushing touchdown. So you were certainly happy, especially because there had been a number of weeks where Rodgers just wasn't delivering, the fantasy production that many folks were expecting.
I got to tell you, I had Richard Rodgers on my bench for the first 12 weeks of the season because my tight end to start was Travis Kelce. And the first 11 weeks of the season. And what I couldn't wait anymore. I picked up Jacob Tammy because it seemed like Jacob Tammy was getting, some decent stats, and in case something happened with Kelce because he's been on the injury report, I could start Tammy. And of course, the 2 weeks that I dropped Richard Rodgers, he all of a sudden is now like the number 2 guy to Aaron Rodgers in the arsenal. And I'm just sitting my shaking my head. I was like, and this is why fantasy football will always be that funky little sport that can throw a curveball at any given time. So, and what do you call? I got to give, but I got to give Richard Rodgers kudos for having a great game. Another scary fact was that for 36 minutes, the score was 20. It was Green Bay put up a goose egg. They scored all 27 points in the last, I believe, 20 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Scary thought.
Well, I mean, we've seen them struggle this year. We talked about it last week, that it hasn't been the slam dunk. In fact, there's just so many games this year that are really sort of coin flip games that we never would have expected it to be. But, the other big story kind of coming out of Thursday's game was just really the Eddie Lacy non-factor. I mean, he barely was the presence on the field at all. It came out after the fact. If you were in a PPR league, he actually was caught one pass for negative yardage. So you got 1.10 points in PPR because he also had a minuscule amount of rushing yards. And it turns out that he had missed his curfew, a team curfew on Wednesday with another player, a third-string running back named Alonzo Harris. And so his punishment was to essentially be benched for most of the game, and the other dude was cut. So, I guess that the good news is he still has a job. But, a lot of people started Eddie Lacy. He was coming off back-to-back games of 100 yards, combo yards or more, and been productive for really the first time in back-to-back weeks all season. And then he puts up, as you're heading into the playoffs, a 1-point fantasy production for owners. So that makes him very hard to trust next week because we just don't know whether this benching is going to be, longer, prolonged. I mean, the guy that had the most rushing yards was the player that they had sort of promoted from the practice squad. So it's kind of a disaster for Eddie Lacy and, Eddie Lacy fantasy owners. So if you started Lacy on Thursday night, you're really looking this weekend to maximize your lineup because you're going to have to make up for kind of that poor outing that he had on Thursday night.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. Let's move now to Sunday with the games coming up, and I think one game that everybody's going to keep in their sharp eye on is the Philadelphia-New England game. As we all know, Gronk, suffered an injury last week, but it wasn't as serious as they thought. Ian Rappaport actually thought that he would be playing this week. Highly doubt it. I think this is going to be a week they're going to give him rest and everything. But this is the Philadelphia defense, which has been acting like a sieve the last few weeks. There's a game in which Tom Brady can have his offense, humming along. It would be this one. On the other side of the ball, do we see Sam Bradford? Do we see Mark Sanchez? Do we get any production out of DeMarco Murray? I don't know. I mean, we're talking about a complete dumpster fire right now in Philadelphia, and this would be the perfect tonic for New England to get better. What do you see fantasy-wise going on in this game?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about, I think Brady will be fine regardless of the fact that he won't have Gronk. He, doesn't have Edelman. They lost Deion Lewis. Danny Amendola should be back from his knee injury this week, and I expect he'll do a lot of damage out of the slot. He could lead the Patriots in targets this week. Just by contrast, Golden Tate was caught 7 balls, 50 yards, and a touchdown against the Eagles on Thanksgiving. So, and we know that Brady will look for Amendola in the slot. I also think it could be a really good game for Brandon LaFell. He'll be going against a rookie cornerback named Eric Rowe, and so I think that he could, have a big game. Not that LaFell, is, let's say, like a Calvin Johnson type, but I do like the matchup. And I also think that for many fantasy owners for many of Gronk's fantasy owners, they're picking up Scott Chandler. He isn't the athlete that Gronk is. But again, at this point in the season, you know that Gronk's targets will go somewhere. And while the Eagles aren't a sieve against the tight end, I do think that, Chandler had 11 targets last week in Sunday's loss to the Broncos. And he is kind of a red zone threat. He played that role in Buffalo, and he'll do that again here. So I would be really surprised if we didn't see a lot of Chandler this week, and certainly, expect him to be a factor. So if you're looking for a backup tight end to cover, whether it's Gronk, Graham, or even Tyler Eifert, Scott Chandler, if he was on your waiver wire, would be someone to look at. As far as the Eagles, it's hard to get excited. I was just talking to my nephew today about this because he's an avid fantasy player, and though he didn't grow up in Philadelphia, he's an Eagles fan because, the family lived there before. And, we were saying you really can't start any Eagle player with confidence. Jordan Matthews is hit or miss. Last week he had a solid game, 15 fantasy points in PPR, but that was a lot due to a touchdown that was from busted coverage. But you can't really start him with confidence. I mean, a lot of people drafted him to be, wide receiver 2, and he's not that. Maybe a wide receiver 3 or a flex or possibly even a 4, depending on your options. And it does look like we should get, Sam Bradford back, but I'm not actually sure that that's a big difference from what we saw with Sanchez. And then as far as the run game, Ryan Matthews is out again, and DeMarco Murray has really kind of been a factor. His production has been limited because the game flow has not really worked in the Eagles' favor, and they just don't have the ability to get that run game going in great spurts. So again, because of all the injuries, you may not have the luxury of sitting DeMarco Murray, but you don't feel confident that he's going to have a big game by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is like this. I really feel that, when you look at that Philadelphia offense, there's nothing that pops anymore. I keep saying it. I think Chip Kelly, thought that his offense can work with any personnel, but I don't think he has the playmakers that he had just like he had a couple of years ago. I mean, when you lose LaShawn McCoy, a Jeremy Maclin, a Deshaun Jackson, that's a lot of talent you're losing over there. And there's nothing on that offense that would spread fear outside of maybe DeMarco Murray. And if you contain DeMarco Murray, you pretty much, to me, contain that team. And it's just been a struggle since game 1 of the regular season. So, I totally get where people are extremely frustrated if you're an owner of any Philadelphia Eagle players on your squad. Let's move to Carolina, New Orleans. We're looking at a possible 12-0 here for Carolina. I know they're saying, but they're going to the Superdome. Superdome hasn't been kind to the Saints lately. And let's be honest, Saints defense, whether it's Rob Ryan or anybody coaching that defense, it's just plain god-awful. I see another